Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about blood pressure. And specifically, we're going to tackle a belief that many of us hold, that a good enough reading means we're in the clear. But as you're about to see, some really fascinating clinical evidence is forcing a complete rethink of that whole idea. For years, we've been told that a systolic blood pressure in the 120s or 130s is a kind of safe harbor. A comfortable spot before you hit the official diagnosis of hypertension. But what if that high normal range isn't a safe zone at all? What if it's actually a period where silent, active damage is taking place? That's the new reality that this research is pointing to.
To really see what's going on, let's look at two people from a big study done by Monash University. On the left, you've got patient A. They have clinical hypertension, no question about it, a reading of 145/95. But on the right, there's patient B. Their reading is 118/78, what most of us would call perfect blood pressure.
So, who do you think is in more danger? Based on everything we've thought for decades, the answer should be obvious, right? It has to be patient A, the one with the high numbers. But when scientists dug deeper into the data, they found something completely unexpected, a real paradox.
That's right. Believe it or not, the patient with the perfect number on the cuff can actually be at a higher risk. How is that even possible? Well, it all comes down to a hidden factor, something that a standard blood pressure cuff just can't see. It's a condition of biochemical strain called heart stress. So let's really dive into what that means. To get this, we have to kind of shift our thinking about blood pressure. It's not just a number from a single doctor's visit. It's really about the constant, relentless force of blood pushing against your arteries, day in and day out for your entire life. There's this amazing study from University College London that followed people from their 30s all the way into their 70s. And what it showed is that heart damage isn't some sudden event. Nope. It's a lifelong process of what scientists call cumulative insult. Think of it like tiny repeated injuries that just add up over time. And the study proved that even a high normal blood pressure in your 30s can cause slow, measurable damage to the heart's tiniest blood vessels decades down the road.
Okay, so if the blood pressure cuff is blind to this slow-motion damage, how in the world do we spot the risk before it's too late? This is where the real paradigm shift happens. We have to move from just a mechanical measurement to a biochemical one. So scientists at Monash University came up with this concept of heart stress. It's not a disease itself, but it's kind of like a biochemical alarm bell. We can detect it by measuring a biomarker in the blood called NT-proBNP. Now, NT-proBNP is basically a little piece of a hormone that your heart muscle spits out when it's being stretched or overworked. So when we see high levels of it, it's a direct sign that the heart is under strain, no matter what the cuff says.
And we're not talking about a small problem here. Researchers looked at data from almost 12,000 older adults and found that over a quarter of them, more than 1 in 4, had this hidden heart stress. And the really critical part? A lot of these folks had what everyone would have considered perfectly normal blood pressure. All right, let's put some real numbers on this risk. We'll start with our baseline group. These are people with no hypertension and no signs of heart stress. We'll just set their risk of a heart attack or stroke at a value of 1. Now let's add in the group we've always focused on. People with high blood pressure, but without any of those biochemical signs of heart stress. Their risk is 41% higher than our baseline group. This is the risk we've been treating for decades. Okay, but here it is. This is the finding that changes everything. Someone with no high blood pressure, remember that perfect reading, but who does have high levels of heart stress, their risk is 79% higher. That's a huge jump, and it's significantly more dangerous than having high blood pressure alone.
So when you see it all laid out like this, the new hierarchy of risk becomes crystal clear. Having heart stress by itself is a more powerful predictor of a future heart attack or stroke than having hypertension by itself. And if you have both, well, the risk skyrockets to more than double the baseline. This data tells us without a doubt that the number on the cuff is only half the story.
This discovery doesn't just change how we measure risk, it totally flips the script on how we should treat it. The old one-size-fits-all approach is, frankly, obsolete. Your ideal blood pressure target actually depends entirely on whether you have this hidden heart stress.
So check this out. For most people, the ones who don't have this underlying heart stress, the data shows a U-shaped risk curve. That means going super low with your blood pressure doesn't really help. In fact, the absolute lowest risk for this group, their sweet spot, is actually in the 130 to 139 range. But, and this is a huge but, for that 25% of people who do have hidden heart stress, the story is completely different. There is no sweet spot.
For them, the risk is a straight line. It just goes up and up with every single point of blood pressure. The only way to get to the lowest possible risk is to be aggressive and aim for a systolic pressure below 120. For this group, every single point matters.
And you know, this whole thing doesn't just stop at the heart. It turns out that the same forces causing damage to the heart's tiny blood vessels are also wreaking havoc on the incredibly delicate network of vessels in our brain. A ton of research has now identified this critical window of vulnerability right in midlife between the ages of 45 and 65. It's during these years that high blood pressure becomes a primary driver of dementia later in life. The data is pretty clear that cognitive decline actually speeds up after hypertension starts. This makes managing your blood pressure in your 40s, 50s, and 60s one of the single most important things you can do for your brain health long term.
So, after all that science, what's the takeaway? What's the new game plan? The big point is we have to stop thinking in snapshots and start thinking about trends, moving from just one number to a much more personalized risk profile.
So the new clinical approach is really fourfold. First, we have to start seeing that 120 to 139 range not as normal, but as elevated, a reason to start a conversation. Second, stop focusing on one reading. It's the trend, the trajectory over years that really tells the story. Third, if you're over 65 or have other risk factors, you should be asking your doctor about biomarker testing for heart stress. And finally, your treatment target needs to be personalized based on that deeper risk profile.
Look, if there's just one thing you take away from all of this, let it be this. Waiting until your blood pressure is officially high is waiting way too long. The evidence is now just overwhelming. The silent damage to your heart and your brain begins in that normal high range. The time to act isn't when your blood pressure finally becomes a problem. It's while it's still considered good enough.